The rain had just stopped. Tokyo's streets shimmered beneath thousands of glowing lights. A businessman stepped out of the subway. His suit was ordinary. His shoes had been polished so many times they had begun to lose their original color. He carried no luxury watch, no designer bag, no expensive car keys, just a small leather notebook that looked older than some of the buildings around him. He walked past stores filled with things he could easily afford. The newest phone, luxury handbags, limited edition sneakers, watches worth more than most people earn in a year. He barely looked. He kept walking. 1 block later, he stopped at a tiny grocery store. He compared the prices of 2 identical cartons of milk. One was cheaper by less than $1. He smiled, bought the cheaper one, then disappeared into the crowd. Nothing about him suggested wealth. If you passed him on the street, you probably wouldn't notice him. But here's the strange part. That ordinary man may quietly become wealthier over his lifetime than someone earning twice his salary in another country. Not because he makes more, not because he inherited money, not because he invested in some secret opportunity, but because of one invisible decision, repeated thousands of times. How can someone who appears to have so little end up with so much? That question has puzzled economists for decades. Entire countries have become richer, yet their people often feel poorer. In many places, salaries have risen. Technology has become cheaper. Shopping has never been easier. And yet, household debt keeps climbing. Savings keep shrinking. Stress keeps growing. It's a paradox. The world has become better at making money, but somehow worse at keeping it. Except there is one country that has quietly followed a different path. A country where many people have learned to separate happiness from consumption. A place where an old notebook can be more valuable than a luxury wallet. Where repairing something is often respected more than replacing it. Where silence can be considered richer than noise. Where owning less often means living more. Japan. For decades, visitors have noticed something unusual. The trains are clean, the streets are remarkably orderly, homes are often small, storage space is limited, yet inside those modest homes lives a philosophy that has quietly influenced millions of financial decisions. Not through complicated investment strategies, not through financial gurus, but through everyday habits. Tiny choices, repeated patiently, until they become an entirely different way of seeing the world. But this story isn't really about money. Money is only the surface. Beneath it lies something much older. Something that survived wars, economic miracles, financial crashes, natural disasters, and centuries of cultural change. A philosophy so simple, many people overlook it completely. Yet once you understand it, you may never look at spending the same way again, because wealth doesn't always begin in a bank account. Sometimes it begins with a question. Do I really need this? That question sounds almost too ordinary, almost disappointing. Surely becoming wealthy requires something more dramatic. Higher income, better investments, perfect timing, a lucky break. But history keeps telling a different story. Imagine 2 people. Both earn exactly the same salary. They wake up on the same Monday, drink similar coffee, work similar hours, receive identical paychecks. 30 years later, one has financial freedom, the other lives paycheck to paycheck. What happened? Most people immediately think of investments. Stocks, real estate, business opportunities. Those matter, but they come later. Long before investments multiply wealth, behavior creates it. And behavior is shaped by stories. Stories we inherit without realizing it. Stories about success, status, happiness, enough. Every culture tells different stories. Some teach that success should be visible. Others teach that success should be quiet. Some reward showing wealth. Others admire hiding it. Japan's story is different from almost anywhere else. To understand why, we have to travel back hundreds of years. Long before department stores, before online shopping, before advertisements followed people through glowing screens. Back to a world where resources were precious, because wasting them could mean survival itself. Picture a village surrounded by mountains. Winter is approaching, wood is limited, rice must last until spring. Every tool has been handmade. Every piece of cloth required countless hours of labor. Nothing arrives tomorrow through overnight shipping. If something breaks, you repair it. If clothing tears, you stitch it. If a bowl cracks, you don't immediately throw it away. You ask another question, can it become something even more beautiful? That sounds poetic today. Back then, it was simply life. Necessity shaped values. Values became traditions. Traditions became identity. Generations grew up believing that objects deserved respect, because every object represented someone's time, someone's effort, someone's life. That belief still echoes today. It even has a name, Mottainai. The word has no perfect English translation. It carries sadness, gratitude, respect, responsibility, all at once. Imagine accidentally dropping perfectly good food into the trash. An older Japanese grandmother might softly whisper, Mottainai. Not as criticism, more like mourning, because something valuable has been wasted, not only the object, but everything that made the object possible. The farmer, the rain, the soil, the transport, the cook, the energy, the time. Nothing exists alone. Everything carries invisible effort, and wasting it means ignoring that invisible chain. Suddenly, buying something isn't just spending money, it's accepting responsibility. That simple shift changes everything. Here's where the mystery deepens. Modern advertising teaches the exact opposite. Every day, millions of people hear subtle messages. You deserve more. Upgrade now. New version available. Limited edition. Only today. Almost sold out. Each message quietly whispers the same idea. Your current life is incomplete. One more purchase, and you'll finally become the person you've always wanted to be. It's persuasive because it doesn't sell products, it sells identities. A watch becomes confidence, a car becomes respect, shoes become success, a phone becomes belonging. The object is never really the product, the emotion is. Japan certainly has advertising, it has luxury brands, fashion districts, technology stores that stretch for entire city blocks. People buy beautiful things. But underneath, much of the culture remains a quiet resistance. Not everyone asks, what do I want? Many first ask, what purpose will this serve? That single question creates an invisible filter, and invisible filters shape visible lives. Behavioral psychologists have spent decades studying this phenomenon. One surprising discovery appears again and again. Human beings rarely regret not buying something, but they often regret buying impulsively. The excitement fades quickly, the payment remains. Researchers call this hedonic adaptation. A fancy new purchase creates a burst of happiness. Then, the brain adjusts. Yesterday's luxury becomes today's normal. Soon, another purchase promises another emotional boost. The cycle repeats endlessly, like drinking salt water to satisfy thirst. The more you consume, the more consumption feels necessary. Except, some cultures accidentally built defenses against this trap, centuries before psychologists gave it a scientific name. Japanese minimalism isn't about empty rooms. It isn't about throwing everything away. It isn't about living with one chair and two bowls. That's the version social media often celebrates. The real philosophy is much quieter, far more practical. It asks a different question. What adds lasting value? Not temporary excitement, not social approval. Lasting value. There's an old story from Kyoto. A young apprentice once admired an expensive handcrafted tea bowl. Its glaze reflected the afternoon light like still water. He asked his master why such a simple bowl cost so much. The master didn't answer. Instead, he poured tea into it. They drank quietly. When they finished, the master asked, "Did the tea taste different?" The apprentice smiled. "No." The master nodded. "Then remember what you truly paid for." The apprentice looked confused. Years later, he finally understood. The bowl wasn't valuable because it was expensive. It was valuable because it reminded people to slow down, to notice, to appreciate. Its worth lived in experience, not ownership. Modern life often reverses that equation. People collect experiences less and possessions more. Yet possessions slowly become invisible. Think about the furniture in your own home. How much of it did you notice this morning? Probably very little. The extraordinary eventually becomes ordinary. Psychologists call it adaptation. Japanese philosophy quietly calls it forgetting gratitude. And gratitude, more than income, may be one of the greatest predictors of financial peace. But then, something happened that tested these ideas like never before. Japan changed almost overnight. Cities expanded. Factories multiplied. Technology exploded. In fact, the economy began growing at breathtaking speed. People who once repaired everything could suddenly afford almost anything. For a moment, it looked as though Japan would become just another consumer society, and perhaps these ancient philosophies would disappear forever. Instead, something unexpected happened. The old values didn't vanish. They adapted, quietly, patiently, waiting beneath the surface. And when the world became obsessed with buying more, they became more relevant than ever before. Because the greatest financial lesson Japan offers isn't about denying yourself. It isn't about becoming cheap. It isn't even about saving money. It's about understanding a truth that most people spend an entire lifetime chasing without ever realizing they were running in the wrong direction. And that truth begins with one astonishing contradiction. The wealthiest life often starts the moment you stop trying to look wealthy. The wealthiest life often starts the moment you stop trying to look wealthy. At first, that sounds backwards. After all, the world teaches the opposite. Work harder, earn more, buy better, show your success, repeat. But there is a hidden cost to this game, and almost nobody notices it until years have passed. Imagine two neighbors. They move into identical homes. They earn nearly identical salaries. On the surface, their lives look the same, but inside their minds, they are playing completely different games. The first neighbor sees every paycheck as permission. A bigger television, a newer phone, a luxury vacation, a car that turns heads at every traffic light. Each purchase feels like a reward. After all, isn't that why people work so hard? The second neighbor sees every paycheck as possibility. Instead of asking, "What can I buy?" he asks, "What can this money become if I leave it alone?" The difference sounds almost invisible. But time notices everything. One decision creates comfort for a weekend, the other creates freedom for decades, and freedom is one of the rarest forms of wealth. Here's the strange part. Freedom doesn't usually announce itself. It arrives quietly. One emergency that doesn't become a crisis, one unexpected bill that doesn't cause panic, one job that can be left because staying is no longer necessary. Money stored today becomes choices tomorrow. That simple idea lies at the heart of Japanese financial thinking, not because everyone studies finance, but because many people grow up learning something much deeper. Self-control is a form of respect. Respect for yourself, respect for your future, respect for the effort that earned every yen. This wasn't created in modern classrooms. It was shaped over centuries. Japan is a country where earthquakes, typhoons, volcanic eruptions, and economic uncertainty have always been part of life. For generations, people understood something that prosperity often makes people forget. Nothing is guaranteed. The harvest may fail, the business may struggle, the unexpected may arrive tomorrow. Preparing for uncertainty wasn't pessimism, it was wisdom. Saving money wasn't fear, it was stability. This way of thinking became especially important after one of the darkest chapters in Japanese history. When World War II ended, entire cities had been reduced to ashes, millions had lost homes, families had lost everything. Food was scarce. Resources were almost non-existent. The country faced a simple question. How do you rebuild when there is almost nothing left? The answer wasn't instant wealth. It wasn't endless consumption. It was discipline. Factories reopened. Communities rebuilt, saved. Workers accepted gradual progress instead of immediate comfort. The world would later call it an economic miracle. But miracles usually hide thousands of ordinary decisions. A worker choosing to save instead of spend, a family repairing instead of replacing, a community investing instead of showing off. One day at a time, one paycheck at a time, one generation at a time. But then, success created a new temptation. By the 1980s, Japan's economy was booming. Real estate prices skyrocketed, stocks climbed higher and higher, luxury shopping became fashionable, money seemed endless. People believed prices would rise forever. Sound familiar? History has a habit of repeating itself. When everyone believes prosperity can never end, that is often when danger is closest. Then came the collapse. The financial bubble burst. Property values crashed. Stock markets fell. Businesses failed. Years of confidence disappeared almost overnight. Many fortunes evaporated. Except not everyone suffered equally. Those who had built their lives on appearances lost the most. Those who had built their lives on resilience endured. The lesson echoed through the country. Again, real wealth isn't measured during good times. It's measured by what remains when good times disappear. That lesson would quietly influence millions of families for decades. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, another story was unfolding. Credit cards became easier to obtain. Advertising became smarter. Shopping malls became larger. Then online shopping arrived. Eventually, people no longer needed to leave home to spend money. A single tap became enough. The brain wasn't prepared for this. For most of human history, buying something required effort. Walking, traveling, talking with another person, handing over physical money. Each step gave the brain time to reconsider. Modern technology removed almost every pause. Now, desire and purchase can happen within seconds. Behavioral economists call these frictionless decisions. When buying becomes effortless, buying becomes frequent. The Japanese approach often reintroduces friction, not through rules, through rituals. One of the most remarkable examples is something surprisingly simple. A notebook, not an app. Not artificial intelligence, not complicated software, just paper. It is called Kakeibo. Its history begins in 1904. A journalist named Hani Motoko noticed something interesting. Families weren't necessarily poor because they earned too little. Many struggled because they didn't truly know where their money was going. So she designed a household journal. Every expense would be written down, every income recorded, every purchase examined. Simple, almost boring, yet incredibly powerful. Before spending money, people first answered 4 questions. How much money do I have? How much would I like to save? How much am I spending? How can I improve? Notice what isn't there. There are no complicated investment formulas, no market predictions, No secret tricks. Only awareness, and awareness changes behavior. Psychologists know something fascinating. People naturally spend less when they must physically record every purchase. Not because someone is watching, because they are watching themselves. Writing slows the mind. It interrupts impulse. It creates a tiny space between desire and action. Sometimes that tiny space changes an entire financial future. Think about the last impulsive purchase you made. Maybe it was online. Maybe it arrived 2 days later. How excited were you after 1 week, 1 month? Can you even remember why you wanted it so badly? The human brain is incredibly good at creating urgency. It is surprisingly poor at predicting lasting satisfaction. This is where everything changes. Japanese minimalism doesn't fight desire. It questions it. There is a profound difference. Fighting creates resistance. Questioning creates understanding. Instead of saying, I can't buy this, the philosophy gently asks, why do I want this? That question can be uncomfortable, because the answer often has nothing to do with the object. Sometimes people shop because they're lonely. Sometimes because they're anxious. Sometimes because they're exhausted. Sometimes because buying something feels easier than facing an emotion. Retail therapy feels real, because for a brief moment, the brain rewards novelty with dopamine. A package arrives, the excitement rises, hope returns. Then, days later, the feeling quietly disappears. The emotion remains unresolved. Only now, there is less money in the bank. The object wasn't solving the problem, it was distracting from it. The Japanese concept of mindfulness gently exposes this pattern, not with judgment, with curiosity. Imagine standing in a store. You pick up an expensive jacket. Instead of immediately asking, can I afford this? You ask, what feeling am I trying to buy? Confidence, acceptance, status, comfort, belonging? The answer may surprise you, because emotions cannot be purchased, they can only be experienced. Here's another mystery. Why do some of the happiest moments in life cost almost nothing? Watching snow fall through a window, sharing tea with an old friend, walking through a quiet forest, listening to rain on the roof, watching children laugh without worrying about tomorrow. These memories often become priceless, not because they were expensive, because they were fully lived. Japanese culture has long celebrated these moments. There's even a concept called ma. It refers to the space between things, the pause, the silence, the emptiness that gives everything else meaning. Music needs silence. Paintings need empty space. Gardens need open ground. Life needs moments untouched by constant consumption. Modern society often fears emptiness. An empty calendar feels like failure. An empty room feels unfinished. An empty shelf seems like wasted space. So people fill everything. Schedules, closets, garages, phones, minds. But here's the strange irony. The more life becomes crowded, the harder it becomes to notice what truly matters. Minimalism isn't removing joy, it's removing distraction. The ancient Zen masters understood this centuries ago. They knew the mind behaves much like a glass of muddy water. Shake it constantly, and it never becomes clear. Leave it still, and clarity appears on its own. Money works in a surprisingly similar way. Constant spending creates financial noise. Constant comparison creates emotional noise. Constant upgrading creates psychological noise. Silence reveals what was already enough. But then, a completely unexpected scientific discovery began supporting ideas that Zen monks had practiced for hundreds of years, and what researchers found would completely change the way psychologists understand happiness, desire, and the true relationship between money and the human brain. For centuries, Zen monks had no brain scanners, no laboratories, no neuroscience journals, yet they spent entire lifetimes observing one thing, the human mind, not through machines, but through silence. They noticed something strange. The mind rarely rests where the body is. While drinking tea, it imagines tomorrow. While walking through a garden, it replays yesterday. While sitting with loved ones, it wanders somewhere else entirely. The body lives in the present. The mind keeps leaving. At the time, these observations sounded like philosophy. Today, modern neuroscience tells a remarkably similar story. Brain imaging has revealed that much of our mental activity happens on what scientists call the default mode network. It becomes active when the mind drifts, when it compares, when it imagines, when it worries, when it replays old conversations, when it creates stories about what life should have been. This network is incredibly useful. Without it, there would be no planning, no creativity, no imagination. But there is a hidden danger. Left unchecked, it becomes a comparison machine, and comparison may be one of the most expensive habits in modern life. Imagine opening your phone for just 5 minutes. A friend is standing beside a new sports car. Someone else is vacationing in Greece. Another person just bought a larger home. Another is wearing a watch worth more than your annual salary. Within seconds, your perfectly ordinary morning has changed. Nothing in your own life became worse. Your house didn't shrink, your paycheck didn't decrease, your family didn't disappear, yet somehow everything feels slightly less satisfying. Why? Because the brain rarely measures success in absolute terms. It measures it relatively. Behavioral scientists call this social comparison. It is one of the oldest survival mechanisms humans possess. Thousands of years ago, knowing your place within a tribe helped determine access to food, protection, and mates. Your brain evolved to constantly ask one question: where do I stand? In ancient villages, the answer came from perhaps 50 or 100 people. Today, that same brain compares itself with millions: movie stars, athletes, billionaires, influencers, people carefully displaying only the brightest moments of their lives. The comparison never ends, and neither does the feeling of falling behind. Here's the strange part. Many of those people are trapped in the same cycle. They are comparing themselves to someone else. A millionaire envies a billionaire. A billionaire envies another billionaire. Success keeps moving. The finish line keeps running away. The race never ends. Japanese minimalism quietly steps off the track. Not because ambition is wrong, but because endless comparison steals the ability to enjoy enough. There is an old Zen story. A student approached his master carrying a beautiful porcelain cup. He admired it constantly, protected it carefully, feared even the smallest scratch. One afternoon, the master smiled and said something unexpected. "To me, that cup is already broken." The student looked shocked. "But it's perfect." The master nodded. "Yes. And because I know one day it will fall, one day it will crack, I appreciate every moment I use it." At first, the lesson feels sad until you realize what it truly means. Attachment often creates fear. Gratitude creates freedom. When we believe possessions define us, losing them feels like losing ourselves. When we appreciate them without clinging, they become gifts instead of burdens. This philosophy appears throughout Japanese life, not only in homes, but in art, gardens, architecture, even broken pottery. One of the most beautiful examples is called Kintsugi. Imagine dropping a handmade bowl onto the floor. It shatters into several pieces. Most people would throw it away, buy another one. Problem solved. But in Japan, some artisans do something extraordinary. They patiently gather every fragment. Months may pass. Then they repair the cracks using lacquer mixed with powdered gold. Not to hide the damage, to celebrate it. The fracture becomes the most beautiful part of the bowl. Its history becomes visible. Its scars become its identity. The finished bowl is often worth more than it was before it broke. Think about that for a moment. In many cultures, perfection creates value. In Kintsugi, imperfection creates beauty. What does this have to do with money? Everything. Modern consumer culture often teaches replacement. Phone slightly slower? Upgrade. Table scratched? Replace it. Shoes faded? Buy another pair. Life becomes an endless search for flawless possessions. But Kintsugi whispers a different truth. Repair, restore, respect. Not because you cannot afford something new, because not everything valuable needs replacing. That mindset changes more than spending. It changes identity. Someone who constantly replaces things eventually begins replacing experiences. Relationships become disposable, jobs become temporary, commitments become optional. The habit of replacing quietly spreads. Minimalism interrupts that pattern. It asks, what deserves care? Because what receives care often lasts. The Japanese have another word that reflects this way of thinking, Shokunin. It roughly means craftsman, but the meaning runs much deeper. A Shokunin isn't simply someone who makes objects. It is someone who believes every task deserves excellence, whether building furniture, preparing sushi, growing vegetables, or sweeping a sidewalk. The work itself becomes an expression of character. Imagine spending 40 years making the same type of wooden chair, not because you lack imagination, but because every chair teaches you something new. A slightly smoother edge, a stronger joint, a better balance. Improvement becomes endless, not dramatic, quiet, steady, almost invisible. This attitude produces something remarkable. People stop chasing constant novelty. Instead, they deepen what already exists. The same principle applies to money. Instead of endlessly increasing consumption, they improve their relationship with what they already have. The result isn't deprivation, it's contentment. Researchers studying happiness have repeatedly found an interesting pattern. After basic needs are met, additional income still matters, but its emotional impact gradually becomes smaller. Economists call this diminishing marginal utility. The first warm meal matters enormously. The 10th luxury handbag, not so much. The first safe home transforms life. The 5th bedroom rarely transforms happiness. Yet many people spend decades climbing a ladder whose upper steps become increasingly less rewarding. They keep climbing anyway, because everyone else is climbing too. But then, something happened that forced millions of people around the world to stop. Almost overnight, airports became quiet, Shopping districts emptied, commutes disappeared, calendars were erased. The COVID-19 pandemic changed daily life in ways few imagined possible. For a brief moment, something remarkable happened. People stayed home, closets remained full, restaurants closed, luxury stores waited, and many began asking a question they had never seriously considered before. How much of my spending was actually necessary? Some discovered they had been buying convenience. Others discovered they had been buying status. Others realized they had simply been buying out of habit. Around the world, interest in Japanese minimalism surged. Books were reread, homes were reorganized, people donated belongings they hadn't touched in years. Not because they suddenly hated possessions, because the pause revealed something. Owning more had not created the peace they expected. The silence exposed the truth. But then, another challenge emerged. As restrictions ended, advertising returned louder than ever. Algorithms became smarter. Recommendations became more personal. Shopping became even easier. The battle was no longer taking place inside stores. It was taking place inside attention itself. Because in the modern world, the most valuable thing companies compete for isn't your money, it's your focus. And wherever your focus goes, your spending often follows. Which raises a much deeper question. If attention has become the world's most valuable currency, who truly controls yours? That question would lead Japanese philosophy beyond money and into something far more important. Time. Because the greatest investment most people waste isn't sitting in their bank account, it's quietly disappearing, one ordinary day at a time. There is one resource more valuable than gold, more valuable than real estate, more valuable than every stock market on earth combined. Every billionaire receives exactly the same amount. Every student, every factory worker, every retiree. No one can borrow more of it. No one can manufacture it. No one can recover what has already been spent. Time. The strange thing about money is that it can return. Lose $1,000 and you can earn another 1,000. Lose 10 years and no amount of wealth can buy them back. This sounds obvious, almost too obvious. Yet most people organize their lives as though money is the scarce resource and time is endless. The Japanese perspective quietly flips that equation. Money exists to protect time, not the other way around. That idea changes everything. Imagine two people. The first earns twice as much as the second, but he works 65 hours every week. He answers emails before sunrise. He checks messages during dinner. His vacations are interrupted by conference calls. His weekends disappear into meetings. He owns a beautiful house. He barely lives inside it. The second earns less, much less, but every evening he walks home before sunset. He cooks with his family. He reads. He gardens. He sleeps well. He has enough. Which one is richer? The answer isn't as simple as it first appears. Modern economics often measures wealth in dollars. Ancient wisdom measured it differently, by freedom, freedom to choose, freedom to rest, freedom to say no, freedom to live according to your values instead of your bills. That is why Japanese minimalism is often misunderstood. People assume it is about reducing possessions. It isn't. Possessions are simply the visible part. The invisible goal is reducing unnecessary obligations. Every unnecessary purchase creates invisible commitments. A larger mortgage, higher insurance, more maintenance, more cleaning, more repairs, more stress. One object rarely arrives alone. It brings an entire chain of responsibilities with it. Imagine buying a luxury sports car. The excitement is immediate. The compliments feel good, but then the premium fuel, the expensive maintenance, the larger insurance bill, the fear of scratches, the anxiety of parking, the monthly payment. The object begins to own part of your attention. The purchase is over. The obligation has only begun. This is why some Japanese thinkers speak of lightness, not physical lightness, mental lightness. Owning only what truly serves your life creates something money alone cannot purchase. Space. Space in your home, space in your calendar, space in your mind. And in that space, clarity begins to grow. There's an old Zen saying, you should sit in meditation for 20 minutes every day. Unless you are too busy, then you should sit for an hour. The meaning isn't really about meditation, it's about priorities. The moments when life feels most chaotic are often the moments when slowing down becomes most important. The same principle applies to money. When spending becomes automatic, that is exactly when awareness matters most. But here's the strange part. Many people don't spend because they need more. They spend because they have less sleep, less peace, less connection, less purpose. Psychologists have discovered something fascinating. Willpower is not an unlimited resource. After a long, stressful day, the brain becomes mentally exhausted. Decision fatigue sets in. Self-control weakens. Suddenly, ordering expensive takeout feels easier than cooking. Buying something online feels easier than sitting with uncomfortable emotions. The purchase isn't solving the problem. It's treating exhaustion. Japanese daily life has traditionally included small rituals that interrupt this cycle. Removing shoes before entering the home, preparing tea slowly, wrapping gifts with extraordinary care, cleaning shared spaces, eating with attention. At first glance, these habits seem unrelated to wealth, but they train something far more valuable: deliberateness. They teach that ordinary moments deserve presence, and a person who practices presence in small things often practices it with money as well. Nothing is rushed, nothing is unconscious, nothing is automatic. This brings us to one of the most misunderstood ideas in modern culture: productivity. Today, being busy is often treated like a status symbol. Ask someone how they're doing. The answer is almost automatic: busy. Sometimes it's even spoken with pride, as though exhaustion proves importance. But does it? Imagine an old Japanese gardener. Every morning, he tends the same trees, the same stones, the same pond. To an outsider, his work looks repetitive, simple, almost slow. Yet year after year, the garden becomes more beautiful, not because he rushed, because he noticed. He trimmed one branch, adjusted one rock, removed one weed, tiny improvements, repeated consistently. This philosophy has a name: Kaizen. Continuous improvement, small steps, every day. The world often celebrates dramatic transformation. Lose 50 pounds, become a millionaire, build a billion-dollar company. Japanese thinking frequently celebrates something quieter: become 1% better today, then repeat tomorrow. Financially, this approach becomes astonishingly powerful. Saving $20 feels insignificant until it becomes $20 every week, every month, every year, for decades. One tiny decision, repeated consistently, can outperform brilliant decisions made only occasionally. Compounding doesn't only apply to investments, it applies to habits. Every repeated action earns interest. So do repeated mistakes. Buying one unnecessary coffee won't make anyone poor. Buying one every workday for 30 years tells a different story. Ignoring one small expense rarely matters. Ignoring hundreds of them creates an entirely different future. James Clear famously described habits as votes for the person you become. Japanese philosophy expressed a similar idea long before modern self-improvement books existed. Every action shapes character. Every repetition shapes destiny. But then, there's another form of compounding that almost nobody notices. Attention compounds. Gratitude compounds. Stress compounds. Comparison compounds. So does peace. Imagine beginning every morning by opening social media. Immediately, your brain enters comparison mode. Someone has more. Someone travels farther. Someone looks happier. Without realizing it, your emotional balance has already changed before breakfast. Now imagine beginning the day differently. You open the window, the morning air is cool, birds are singing somewhere beyond the rooftops, you prepare tea, you sit quietly for 5 minutes. Nothing extraordinary happens, yet your mind begins from abundance instead of lack. The rest of the day unfolds differently. One habit, two completely different realities. Japanese culture has long appreciated these quiet beginnings, not because silence is magical, because attention is. Where attention goes, life follows. The philosopher William James once wrote that our experience is what we agree to attend to. Modern neuroscience largely agrees. The brain strengthens whatever it repeatedly focuses on. Focus on scarcity, and scarcity seems everywhere. Focus on gratitude, and abundance quietly expands. This doesn't mean ignoring real financial challenges. It means refusing to let comparison define reality, because reality is often much kinder than comparison suggests. There is another Japanese concept that captures this beautifully. Ichigo ichi. It means one time, one meeting. Every moment happens only once. The conversation with your parents, the walk with your child, the sunset outside your apartment, the meal shared with friends. Each will never exist in exactly the same way again. Once gone, it belongs only to memory. Think about what that means for money. People often sacrifice today's moments, hoping tomorrow will finally bring enough. But tomorrow keeps moving. The promotion arrives. Then another goal appears. The savings account grows, then expectations grow faster. Life quietly slips into the future. Ichigo ichi gently pulls it back. This moment matters, not because it's perfect, because it will never happen again. And suddenly, wealth begins to look different. Not a number, not a title, not a collection of expensive things, but the ability to fully experience the life already unfolding. Yet, there was one final lesson hidden inside Japanese philosophy. A lesson so powerful that it explained why some people remain content through success, failure, wealth, or poverty. It wasn't about minimalism. It wasn't about saving. It wasn't even about money. It was about discovering the difference between making a living and having a reason to live. And once that distinction becomes clear, everything else begins to fall into place. There is a village in Japan where many people continue working long after retirement, not because they have to, because they want to. Visitors often find this confusing. Why would someone in their 70s or even their 90s wake up before sunrise to tend a small garden, repair fishing nets, teach children, or prepare food for neighbors? The answer isn't money. It is something much older. A quiet belief that every morning should begin with a reason to get out of bed. The Japanese call this Ikigai. The word is often translated as a reason for being, but that translation barely scratches the surface. Ikigai is not necessarily a dream job. It isn't fame. It isn't becoming rich. Sometimes it's as simple as growing vegetables, caring for grandchildren, practicing a craft, helping one neighbor, making one person's day a little brighter. The purpose doesn't have to impress anyone else. It only has to make life feel worth living. And here's where everything begins to connect. If your happiness depends on buying something new every month, your peace is controlled by your spending. But if your happiness grows from purpose, your peace becomes much harder to take away. This may be one of the greatest financial advantages anyone can have, because purpose is remarkably inexpensive. Imagine two people finishing work on Friday evening. The first immediately heads to the mall. He feels restless. Another purchase might make the weekend feel exciting. The second walks home. She waters a small garden, reads a few chapters of a favorite book, practices the piano, calls an old friend, cooks dinner slowly. By Monday, both spent time. But only one believed fulfillment had to be purchased. The other created it. Psychologists have discovered something fascinating. People with a strong sense of purpose often make better long-term decisions, not because they possess extraordinary discipline, because they think beyond today. Purpose stretches time. Impulses shrink it. A person chasing only immediate pleasure asks, what feels good right now? A person guided by purpose asks, what kind of life am I building? Those are completely different questions, and they lead to completely different financial futures. This is why Japanese philosophy rarely separates money from character. Money simply amplifies existing habits. If someone is patient, wealth often rewards patience. If someone is impulsive, more income often creates larger impulses. Money doesn't automatically solve behavioral problems. Sometimes it magnifies them. There is an old saying often attributed to Warren Buffett, do not save what is left after spending. Spend what is left after saving. Simple, yet profoundly difficult, because it asks us to reverse our instincts. Japanese households have practiced similar thinking for generations. Savings often come first. Lifestyle adjusts afterward. This is not about deprivation. It's about deciding in advance what matters most. Every dollar receives a purpose before it disappears. Without a plan, money tends to follow emotion. With a plan, emotion begins to follow values. Behavioral economists call this mental accounting. People naturally assign different meanings to money depending on where it comes from and where it goes. A tax refund feels easier to spend. A bonus feels like free money. Cash feels more valuable than numbers on a screen. Understanding these mental shortcuts helps explain why so many intelligent people struggle financially. The issue is rarely intelligence. It's psychology. And psychology can be trained. This is where another Japanese practice quietly reveals its brilliance. Many families involve children in simple financial conversations from a young age. Not with lectures, with participation. Children may help prepare shopping lists, compare prices, learn to appreciate food instead of wasting it, repair toys instead of replacing them immediately. These experiences teach an invisible lesson. Resources are not endless, neither is time. Gratitude begins early. So does responsibility. Imagine growing up believing that every object deserves respect. How differently might you treat your clothes, your books, your phone, your money? The habits formed in childhood often become the financial instincts of adulthood. But then, something remarkable happened. As the world became wealthier, another crisis quietly spread. Not a financial crisis, a meaning crisis. Millions of people reported feeling disconnected, anxious, lonely, successful on paper, yet strangely empty inside. Researchers noticed an uncomfortable pattern. Many people had achieved the goals they once believed would make them happy. The higher salary, the larger house, the luxury car, the impressive title, yet the satisfaction didn't last. The mountain had been climbed. The view wasn't what they expected. Why? Because goals are destinations. Meaning is a direction. Destinations end. Directions continue. A person driven only by goals constantly needs another finish line. A person guided by purpose finds value in the journey itself. Japanese culture has long embraced this distinction. Consider the tea ceremony. To an outsider, it may appear inefficient. Everything happens slowly. Every movement is intentional. Every gesture practiced. In a world obsessed with speed, the ceremony almost feels rebellious. Yet that is precisely the point. The goal isn't merely drinking tea. The experience itself becomes the reward. Modern life often rushes through experiences to reach outcomes. Japanese philosophy gently asks another question. What if the experience is the outcome? What if preparing dinner matters as much as eating it? What if walking matters as much as arriving? What if earning money matters, but living wisely matters even more? These questions sound philosophical, but they produce surprisingly practical consequences. People who enjoy ordinary moments often require fewer extraordinary purchases to feel fulfilled. Contentment reduces unnecessary consumption, not through force, through abundance, because abundance isn't always having more. Sometimes it's finally realizing that enough already exists. This idea can feel uncomfortable, especially in cultures built around constant growth. After all, if everyone bought less, wouldn't the economy suffer? It's a fair question. But Japanese minimalism isn't anti-commerce. It doesn't reject beautiful craftsmanship. It doesn't reject quality. In fact, it often encourages paying more for something that lasts longer, buying one excellent pair of shoes instead of 5 disposable pairs, choosing one timeless jacket instead of chasing every trend, supporting skilled artisans instead of endless mass production. The goal is not less value. The goal is less waste. This brings us back to Mottainai, that quiet word we encountered earlier, the sadness of waste. But now its meaning has grown. Waste is not only throwing away food or replacing furniture or buying unnecessary gadgets. There's another kind of waste, perhaps the greatest waste of all. Wasting attention, wasting relationships, wasting health, wasting years chasing approval from people who are too busy chasing approval themselves. One day, an elderly Japanese carpenter was asked the secret to his peaceful life. He smiled, then picked up a block of unfinished wood. This tree spent 50 years growing. He ran his hand gently across its grain. If I rush my work, I waste 50 years. Then he looked at the interviewer. If I rush my life, what am I wasting? The room became silent because everyone already knew the answer. Life itself. That question lingers long after the conversation ends. What exactly are we spending our lives buying? More importantly, what are we trading away to get it? Every purchase costs more than money. It costs hours of your life, hours spent earning, planning, maintaining, protecting, cleaning, replacing. The price tag never tells the whole story. A famous thought experiment asks you to imagine that every object in your home quietly whispers the number of hours it cost you to earn. Not dollars. Hours. Would that expensive gadget feel different? Would those impulse purchases still seem irresistible? Would that luxury upgrade still be worth it? Suddenly, money becomes visible in a new way. It is frozen time, stored effort, compressed life, and that realization changes everything. But there is still one final truth waiting beneath all of this. A truth that explains why some of the happiest people in the world own surprisingly little, while some of the wealthiest never feel they have enough. It is the difference between possessing things and being possessed by them. That final lesson would become the quiet heart of everything Japanese minimalism has been trying to teach all along. There is a village in Japan where many people continue working long after retirement, not because they have to, because they want to. Visitors often find this confusing. Why would someone in their 70s or even their 90s wake up before sunrise to tend a small garden, repair fishing nets, teach children, or prepare food for neighbors? The answer isn't money. It is something much older. A quiet belief that every morning should begin with a reason to get out of bed. The Japanese call this Ikigai. The word is often translated as a reason for being, but that translation barely scratches the surface. Ikigai is not necessarily a dream job. It isn't fame. It isn't becoming rich. Sometimes it's as simple as growing vegetables, caring for grandchildren, practicing a craft, helping one neighbor, making one person's day a little brighter. The purpose doesn't have to impress anyone else. It only has to make life feel worth living. And here's where everything begins to connect. If your happiness depends on buying something new every month, your peace is controlled by your spending. But if your happiness grows from purpose, your peace becomes much harder to take away. This may be one of the greatest financial advantages anyone can have, because purpose is remarkably inexpensive. Imagine two people finishing work on Friday evening. The first immediately heads to the mall. He feels restless. Another purchase might make the weekend feel exciting. The second walks home. She waters a small garden, reads a few chapters of a favorite book, practices the piano, calls an old friend, cooks dinner slowly. By Monday, both spent time. But only one believed fulfillment had to be purchased. The other created it. Psychologists have discovered something fascinating. People with a strong sense of purpose often make better long-term decisions, not because they possess extraordinary discipline, because they think beyond today. Purpose stretches time. Impulses shrink it. A person chasing only immediate pleasure asks, "What feels good right now?" A person guided by purpose asks, "What kind of life am I building?" Those are completely different questions, and they lead to completely different financial futures. This is why Japanese philosophy rarely separates money from character. Money simply amplifies existing habits. If someone is patient, wealth often rewards patience. If someone is impulsive, more income often creates larger impulses. Money doesn't automatically solve behavioral problems. Sometimes it magnifies them. There is an old saying often attributed to Warren Buffett: "Do not save what is left after spending. Spend what is left after saving." Simple, yet profoundly difficult, because it asks us to reverse our instincts. Japanese households have practiced similar thinking for generations. Savings often come first. Lifestyle adjusts afterward. This is not about deprivation. It's about deciding in advance what matters most. Every dollar receives a purpose before it disappears. Without a plan, money tends to follow emotion. With a plan, emotion begins to follow values. Behavioral economists call this mental accounting. People naturally assign different meanings to money depending on where it comes from and where it goes. A tax refund feels easier to spend. A bonus feels like free money. Cash feels more valuable than numbers on a screen. Understanding these mental shortcuts helps explain why so many intelligent people struggle financially. The issue is rarely intelligence. It's psychology. And psychology can be trained. This is where another Japanese practice quietly reveals its brilliance. Many families involve children in simple financial conversations from a young age, not with lectures, with participation. Children may help prepare shopping lists, compare prices, learn to appreciate food instead of wasting it, repair toys instead of replacing them immediately. These experiences teach an invisible lesson. Resources are not endless, neither is time. Gratitude begins early. So does responsibility. Imagine growing up believing that every object deserves respect. How differently might you treat your clothes, your books, your phone, your money? The habits formed in childhood often become the financial instincts of adulthood. But then, something remarkable happened. As the world became wealthier, another crisis quietly spread. Not a financial crisis, a meaning crisis. Millions of people reported feeling disconnected, anxious, lonely, successful on paper, yet strangely empty inside. Researchers noticed an uncomfortable pattern. Many people had achieved the goals they once believed would make them happy. The higher salary, the larger house, the luxury car, the impressive title, yet the satisfaction didn't last. The mountain had been climbed. The view wasn't what they expected. Why? Because goals are destinations. Meaning is a direction. Destinations end. Directions continue. A person driven only by goals constantly needs another finish line. A person guided by purpose finds value in the journey itself. Japanese culture has long embraced this distinction. Consider the tea ceremony. To an outsider, it may appear inefficient. Everything happens slowly. Every movement is intentional. Every gesture practiced. In a world obsessed with speed, the ceremony almost feels rebellious. Yet that is precisely the point. The goal isn't merely drinking tea. The experience itself becomes the reward. Modern life often rushes through experiences to reach outcomes. Japanese philosophy gently asks another question. What if the experience is the outcome? What if preparing dinner matters as much as eating it? What if walking matters as much as arriving? What if earning money matters, but living wisely matters even more? These questions sound philosophical, but they produce surprisingly practical consequences. People who enjoy ordinary moments often require fewer extraordinary purchases to feel fulfilled. Contentment reduces unnecessary consumption, not through force, through abundance, because abundance isn't always having more. Sometimes it's finally realizing that enough already exists. This idea can feel uncomfortable, especially in cultures built around constant growth. After all, if everyone bought less, wouldn't the economy suffer? It's a fair question. But Japanese minimalism isn't anti-commerce. It doesn't reject beautiful craftsmanship. It doesn't reject quality. In fact, it often encourages paying more for something that lasts longer. Buying one excellent pair of shoes instead of 5 disposable pairs. Choosing one timeless jacket instead of chasing every trend. Supporting skilled artisans instead of endless mass production. The goal is not less value. The goal is less waste. This brings us back to Mottainai. That quiet word we encountered earlier. The sadness of waste. But now its meaning has grown. Waste is not only throwing away food or replacing furniture or buying unnecessary gadgets. There's another kind of waste, perhaps the greatest waste of all. Wasting attention, wasting relationships, wasting health, wasting years chasing approval from people who are too busy chasing approval themselves. One day, an elderly Japanese carpenter was asked the secret to his peaceful life. He smiled, then picked up a block of unfinished wood. This tree spent 50 years growing. He ran his hand gently across its grain. If I rush my work, I waste 50 years. Then he looked at the interviewer. If I rush my life, what am I wasting? The room became silent because everyone already knew the answer. Life itself. That question lingers long after the conversation ends. What exactly are we spending our lives buying? More importantly, what are we trading away to get it? Every purchase costs more than money. It costs hours of your life, hours spent earning, planning, maintaining, protecting, cleaning, replacing. The price tag never tells the whole story. A famous thought experiment asks you to imagine that every object in your home quietly whispers the number of hours it cost you to earn. Not dollars. Hours. Would that expensive gadget feel different? Would those impulse purchases still seem irresistible? Would that luxury upgrade still be worth it? Suddenly, money becomes visible in a new way. It is frozen time, stored effort, compressed life, and that realization changes everything. But there is still one final truth waiting beneath all of this. A truth that explains why some of the happiest people in the world own surprisingly little, while some of the wealthiest never feel they have enough. It is the difference between possessing things and being possessed by them. That final lesson would become the quiet heart of everything Japanese minimalism has been trying to teach all along. There is a story told in different forms across Japan. An old monk lived alone in a small wooden temple deep in the mountains. His room contained almost nothing. A sleeping mat, a kettle, a wooden bowl, a brush for writing, one robe hanging neatly by the door, nothing more. One afternoon, a wealthy merchant climbed the mountain to meet him. The merchant had traveled with servants, heavy luggage, beautiful gifts, silk clothing, the finest food money could buy. When he entered the monk's room, he looked around in disbelief. "Where is all your furniture?" The monk smiled, then asked a simple question. "Where is yours?" The merchant laughed. "I'm only passing through." The monk nodded gently. "So am I." For a long moment, neither man spoke, because the answer had already been given. Every life, no matter how successful, is temporary. Every house, every possession, every title, every bank account, every trophy, one day, someone else will own them. This isn't a depressing thought. It is one of the most liberating ideas ever discovered. Because when you truly understand that everything is temporary, you begin asking different questions. Not, what can I accumulate? But what is truly worth carrying? This idea appears again and again throughout Japanese philosophy. Everything changes. Nothing lasts forever. Cherry blossoms bloom for only a few days each year. Millions travel across the country just to witness them. Not because they last, because they don't. Their beauty comes from their briefness. If the blossoms remained all year, people would eventually stop noticing them. Impermanence creates appreciation. This idea has a name, mono no aware. It is often translated as the gentle sadness of things. But it means much more. It is the awareness that everything beautiful is also temporary. A child grows up, parents grow older, summer becomes autumn. Friends move away. The seasons never ask for permission, they simply continue. Instead of resisting this truth, Japanese culture often embraces it, because accepting change makes gratitude possible. The same principle applies to money. Many people spend their lives chasing financial certainty, absolute security, a future where nothing unexpected can happen, but such a future has never existed. Markets change, jobs change, technology changes. Entire industries disappear. The world keeps moving. Real security doesn't come from controlling everything. It comes from becoming adaptable. This is where Japanese minimalism reveals its deepest strength. Someone who needs very little cannot easily be controlled by needing more. Imagine two workers. The first has enormous monthly expenses, a luxury mortgage, expensive cars, multiple subscriptions, designer habits. Every paycheck has already been spent before it arrives. Losing his job would be devastating. Now imagine another worker. She lives comfortably below her means. She saves consistently. She owns fewer things. Her expenses are modest. If her company closes tomorrow, she has time. She has choices. She has breathing room. Who is actually wealthier? The paycheck tells one story. Freedom tells another. The ancient Stoic philosopher Seneca wrote something remarkably similar nearly 2,000 years ago. It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, who is poor. Different civilization, different century, same truth. Across cultures, wisdom often arrives at the same destination, not because people copy each other, because human nature rarely changes. We still chase approval, still fear uncertainty, still confuse comfort with happiness, still imagine that one more purchase will finally complete us, yet history keeps whispering the opposite. Here's the strange part. The wealthiest people often discover this lesson last, not because they are foolish, because success can temporarily hide unnecessary habits. A rising income covers countless financial mistakes until one day the income changes, or retirement arrives, or life becomes more complicated. Suddenly, the habits that once seemed harmless become impossible to ignore. This is why financial experts often say income builds lifestyle, habits build wealth. Read out. And habits are surprisingly democratic. They belong to everyone: a student, a nurse, a mechanic, a teacher, a business owner. No one is excluded from small daily choices. That is encouraging, because it means wealth is not only about opportunity, it is also about behavior. There is another Japanese word that rarely appears in conversations about money: Gaman. It means enduring the difficult with patience and dignity. It is not passive suffering, it is quiet resilience, the ability to remain steady when circumstances become difficult. After earthquakes, after economic downturns, after personal hardship, this attitude has helped countless communities rebuild. Financially, Gaman teaches something powerful. Not every desire deserves immediate satisfaction. Not every setback requires panic. Not every market decline demands fear. Sometimes, the strongest action is patient inaction. Think about planting a tree. You water it, protect it, care for it. Then, you wait. You cannot force it to grow faster by checking it every hour. Money often works the same way. Savings need time. Investments need patience. Skills need repetition. Relationships need consistency. Everything meaningful grows quietly. Modern culture struggles with this. We expect overnight delivery, instant streaming, immediate responses, one-click purchases. Waiting feels outdated, but nature has never hurried. Neither has mastery. Neither has wisdom. And the greatest oak tree in a forest was once an acorn that simply refused to quit. The Japanese understand this deeply. Visit an ancient temple. Some wooden beams are hundreds of years old. Many trees surrounding them were planted by people who knew they would never sit beneath their shade. Imagine that level of thinking, working for a future you may never personally enjoy. Today, many financial decisions are judged by next month, next quarter, next year. Japanese thinking often stretches across generations. Parents save not only for themselves, but for children. Communities protect traditions not only for today, but for people not yet born. This long view changes everything. When you think in decades instead of days, many temptations lose their power. A flashy trend suddenly looks temporary. An impulse purchase suddenly looks insignificant. Patience becomes easier. There's a fascinating experiment conducted by psychologists. Children were offered one marshmallow. If they waited, they would receive two. Some ate the first immediately. Others waited. Years later, researchers found interesting differences. Although the original conclusions have since been refined by later studies, the experiment sparked an important conversation about delayed gratification. The ability to wait often predicts better long-term outcomes in many areas of life. Money is no exception. Every investment is delayed gratification. Every emergency fund is delayed gratification. Every wise financial decision asks the same question: can you sacrifice a little comfort today for much greater freedom tomorrow? Japanese minimalism answers quietly: yes, because tomorrow eventually becomes today, and today's choices become tomorrow's reality. But then, there is one final paradox. A paradox that has puzzled philosophers, economists, and ordinary people for centuries. If buying more doesn't create lasting happiness, then why do so many people keep doing it? The answer isn't found in the wallet. It is found much deeper, inside the human mind itself. And understanding that hidden psychological trap may be the single most valuable financial lesson of all. Imagine walking through a supermarket. You came for bread, maybe some fruit, a few basic ingredients for dinner. 20 minutes later, your cart is overflowing. Chocolate you never planned to buy, a scented candle, a new water bottle, a magazine you probably won't finish, a snack that wasn't even on your mind when you walked through the door. What happened? Did your needs suddenly change? Not at all. Your attention did. Modern shopping is rarely designed around what people need. It is designed around what captures the human brain. And the human brain is astonishingly predictable. Every color, every scent, every song playing softly in the background, every product placed at eye level, every limited time-only sign, every countdown timer, every flashing notification, none of it is accidental. For decades, psychologists, marketers, and behavioral scientists have studied the same question. How do you persuade someone to buy something they weren't planning to buy? The answers are surprisingly simple. Create urgency, create scarcity, create comparison, create emotion. The purchase usually follows. Here's the strange part. The brain often decides first and explains later. Most people believe they buy things because of logic, but neuroscience tells a different story. Emotion moves first. Reason arrives afterward to justify the decision. Think back to the last impulse purchase you made. Perhaps you told yourself, it was on sale, I've worked hard, I deserve this, it might sell out. Those reasons may have felt logical, but beneath them, there was often an emotion: excitement, stress, loneliness, boredom, hope. The object wasn't the real purchase. The feeling was. Japanese philosophy has quietly understood this for centuries, not through brain scans, through observation. Zen teachers notice that desire often behaves like a wave. At first, it rises, it feels powerful, almost impossible to ignore. But something remarkable happens if you simply wait. The wave begins to fall, without acting, without forcing it away. It simply changes. Modern psychologists call this urge surfing. The name is new. The practice is ancient. Imagine standing in front of an expensive display. You want the newest phone. You can almost feel it in your hands. Instead of buying it immediately, you decide to wait 24 hours. The next morning, the desire is smaller. A week later, it may disappear completely. Nothing changed about the phone, only your mind. The urge passed, like every wave eventually does. This simple pause has enormous financial consequences because many purchases are not made for permanent needs. They are made for temporary emotions. The Japanese have long valued the space between stimulus and response. That space is where freedom lives. Without it, life becomes automatic. See, want, buy, repeat. With it, choice returns. This reminds us of another Japanese principle, ma, the meaningful space between things, the pause before action, the silence before music begins again. Modern life is slowly eliminating these spaces. Messages arrive instantly. Movies begin immediately. Food is delivered within minutes. Shopping takes seconds. Even boredom has become rare. The moment silence appears, people reach for their phones. Yet boredom once served an important purpose. It gave the imagination room to breathe. Some of humanity's greatest ideas were born while walking, waiting, or simply doing nothing. The Japanese understand that emptiness is not wasted space. It is fertile ground. Think of a traditional Japanese garden. Notice what isn't there. No unnecessary decorations, no overwhelming colors, no clutter competing for attention. Every stone has a purpose. Every tree has room to breathe. The empty spaces are just as important as the objects themselves. Now, compare that with many modern lives. Closets overflowing, calendars packed, notifications arriving every few minutes, shelves full, minds full, attention scattered in 1,000 directions. The problem isn't only physical clutter, it is mental clutter, and mental clutter is expensive, not only financially, emotionally. Researchers have found that clutter increases stress hormones. It quietly drains mental energy. Every object competes for a tiny piece of attention. One shirt reminds you it needs washing. One unopened package reminds you of unfinished plans. One pile of papers whispers about decisions you've postponed. None of these thoughts seem significant alone. Together, they create invisible exhaustion. Minimalism removes more than objects. It removes tiny decisions, tiny worries, tiny distractions. Each one seems insignificant until they disappear. Then suddenly, the mind feels lighter. There is an old Japanese cleaning tradition performed at the end of each year, osoji. Families clean homes thoroughly before welcoming the new year. On the surface, it is practical. Dust is removed. Rooms are organized. But beneath the cleaning lies a deeper meaning. Let go of what no longer serves you. Prepare for a new beginning. Leave unnecessary burdens behind. Imagine if we applied that idea not only to closets, but to spending habits. Which subscriptions no longer improve your life? Which purchases no longer bring joy? Which financial habits belong to an older version of yourself? Sometimes, wealth grows not by adding more, but by gently removing what no longer matters. Here's another mystery. Why do luxury brands rarely advertise practical features? Think about it. A watch advertisement seldom focuses on accurate timekeeping. No, a luxury car commercial rarely emphasizes fuel efficiency. Instead, they sell something invisible: status, identity, belonging, exclusivity. Psychologists call these symbolic purchases. The object becomes a signal, not just to others, to ourselves. Every purchase quietly answers the question, who am I? A minimalist answers differently. Not through logos, not through price tags, but through intention. Instead of asking, what will people think if I own this? The question becomes, what kind of person am I becoming by choosing this? Notice how different those questions are. One seeks approval, the other seeks alignment. That difference changes everything. The philosopher Epictetus once observed that wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. Centuries later, brain scientists discovered something remarkably similar. The brain's reward system quickly adapts to repeated pleasures. Today's luxury becomes tomorrow's expectation. Then the cycle begins again. This is known as the hedonic treadmill. Imagine running on a treadmill. You move constantly, yet remain in the same place. Consumption often works exactly like that. Each purchase creates a brief emotional lift. Then the baseline resets. Soon, another purchase seems necessary, another upgrade, another vacation. Another achievement. The treadmill speeds up, but life doesn't necessarily become richer. Japanese minimalism steps off the machine, not by rejecting beauty, but by redefining it. Beauty is found in craftsmanship, in usefulness, in longevity, in simplicity, in quiet satisfaction, not endless novelty. There is a beautiful phrase often heard among Japanese artisans: the object should outlive its owner. Think about that. In many parts of the world, products are designed to become obsolete. New models replace old ones. Repairs become impossible. Disposable culture becomes normal. Yet traditional Japanese craftsmanship often pursues the opposite goal: build something worthy of generations. That philosophy applies equally to character. Build habits that outlive temporary emotions. Build wisdom that survives changing trends. Build relationships that deepen with time. Build financial resilience instead of financial appearance. Because appearances fade, resilience compounds. And then, there's perhaps the greatest illusion of all: the belief that happiness is waiting somewhere in the future. After the promotion, after the house, after retirement, after one more achievement, life quietly becomes a series of after. But happiness keeps moving, like the horizon, always visible, never reached. Japanese philosophy gently interrupts this chase. It asks one final question before everything changes. What if the life you've been trying to build is already happening? Just what if wealth is not a destination hidden somewhere ahead, but a way of seeing what already surrounds you? The answer to that question transformed countless ordinary lives across Japan. And in the final chapter, it will reveal why the richest person in the room is not always the one with the biggest bank account. Sometimes, it is simply the one who has finally learned what is enough. The richest person in the room is not always the one with the biggest bank account. Sometimes, it is simply the one who has finally learned what is enough. That word, enough, may be one of the most powerful words in any language, yet it is also one of the rarest. Ask a company how much growth is enough. There is always another target. Ask an investor how much profit is enough. There is always another opportunity. Ask someone chasing status how much recognition is enough. There is always someone more admired. The horizon keeps moving, the destination keeps changing, and life quietly passes by in pursuit of a finish line that never truly exists. But imagine, just for a moment, that someone asks you a different question. Not, how much do you want, but how much is enough? The answer might change your entire life, because once you know what enough looks like, everything beyond it becomes a choice instead of a necessity. That is where freedom begins, for centuries. Japanese philosophy has quietly explored this idea, not through grand speeches, but through ordinary life: a meal prepared with care, a home that fits its purpose, a favorite cup used every morning for 20 years, a bicycle repaired instead of replaced, a conversation enjoyed without checking the time. None of these moments look extraordinary, yet together, they create something many people spend decades searching for: contentment. Contentment is often misunderstood. People confuse it with complacency. They imagine that being content means giving up ambition, stopping growth, accepting mediocrity. But true contentment is something entirely different. It doesn't mean, I don't want to improve. It means my happiness does not depend on endless improvement. There is a profound difference. A content person can still build a business, write books, raise a family, invest wisely, travel the world, create beautiful things. The difference is that success becomes an expression of purpose, not a desperate attempt to fill an invisible emptiness. That emptiness has become one of the defining struggles of modern life. Psychologists sometimes describe it as the arrival fallacy, the belief that reaching the next milestone will finally create lasting happiness. Graduate, then you'll be happy. Get promoted, then you'll relax. Buy the house, then life will feel complete. Retire, then you'll start living. But life has a strange habit. Every arrival becomes another departure. Every achievement becomes another expectation. The finish line quietly moves again. Japanese wisdom interrupts this endless race with a remarkably simple observation. Life is not lived at destinations, it is lived between them. Think back to childhood. Some of the happiest moments probably weren't expensive. Building a blanket fort, running through the rain, eating homemade food with family, watching fireflies on a warm evening, laughing until your stomach hurt. None of those memories required luxury. They required presence. As adults, we often reverse the formula. We pursue luxury hoping it will recreate presence. But presence cannot be purchased. It can only be practiced. This is why mindfulness appears so often in Japanese culture. Whether in tea ceremonies, flower arranging, calligraphy, gardening, or martial arts, the practice is rarely about the activity alone. It is about complete attention. When attention becomes whole, ordinary moments become extraordinary. Money follows a similar pattern. When attention becomes intentional, ordinary financial decisions become life-changing. Skipping one impulse purchase rarely feels significant. Preparing one meal at home rarely feels transformative. Saving one small amount each week seems almost invisible. Yet, life is rarely changed by one dramatic decision. It is shaped by thousands of quiet ones. That is the hidden genius of Japanese minimalism. It never promises overnight transformation. It trusts the power of repetition. A river does not carve through stone because of force. It succeeds because of consistency. The same is true of wealth. The same is true of character. The same is true of peace. There is an old bamboo forest near Kyoto. Visitors often notice something remarkable. The bamboo bends dramatically during powerful storms, almost to the point of breaking. Yet when the wind passes, it rises again, strong, whole, flexible. The tallest oak may resist the storm. The bamboo survives it. Why? Because it understands something many people forget. Strength is not rigidity. Strength is adaptability. Financially, this lesson is priceless. Markets rise, markets fall, jobs change, technology evolves, unexpected expenses appear. The future refuses to follow our plans. The person who survives is rarely the one who predicted everything correctly. It is the one who remained adaptable, who kept learning, who avoided unnecessary burdens, who lived below their means, who valued resilience over appearance. This is why Japanese households have often prioritized stability over spectacle. The goal was never to impress strangers. The goal was to protect tomorrow. Imagine two families. One fills every room with expensive furniture, every driveway with luxury vehicles, every holiday with extravagant spending. The other chooses quality over quantity, experiences over excess, savings over status. 20 years later, an economic recession arrives. The first family suddenly discovers that their lifestyle depended on uninterrupted income. The second family discovers something very different. They have options. Options create confidence. Confidence reduces fear. Fear often drives poor financial decisions. Resilience becomes invisible wealth, and invisible wealth is often the most valuable kind, because it cannot be photographed, it cannot be posted online, it rarely attracts attention, but it quietly transforms lives. There is another Japanese idea that ties everything together: Shinrin-yoku, forest bathing. Not hiking, not exercising, simply spending time among trees, listening to leaves move in the wind, breathing deeply, allowing nature to slow the nervous system. Researchers have found that time in nature can reduce stress hormones, lower blood pressure, and improve mood. For centuries, people sought healing by adding more. Japanese wisdom often sought healing by returning to what had always been there. The forest, silence, community, craftsmanship, gratitude, enough. Perhaps that is why minimalism resonates so deeply today. It isn't merely about owning fewer possessions, it's about recovering something modern life quietly misplaced: attention, presence, purpose, freedom. These cannot be ordered with next-day shipping. They cannot be upgraded every year. They cannot be measured by followers or luxury brands or the size of a paycheck. They are cultivated, slowly, patiently, one decision at a time. So, what does building wealth the Japanese way actually mean? It means understanding that every dollar represents a piece of your life. Spend it with intention, save it with purpose, invest it with patience. It means realizing that the greatest luxury is not owning everything. It is needing very little. It means recognizing that financial freedom is less about earning endlessly and more about wanting wisely. It means remembering that gratitude turns what you already have into enough. And perhaps the most important lesson of all, wealth is not the ability to buy anything you want. It is the ability to live well without constantly wanting more. One day, many years from now, your possessions will belong to someone else. Your job title will be forgotten. The newest phone will become obsolete. The fashionable trends of today will seem strangely old, but the way you spent your time, the way you treated people, the habits you practiced, the peace you carried, those things leave a far deeper legacy. In the end, the quiet man who walked past the luxury stores on that rainy evening in Tokyo was never poor. He had discovered something that many people spend an entire lifetime chasing. He understood that every unnecessary purchase steals a little from tomorrow, while every intentional choice quietly builds a life of freedom. He wasn't trying to look wealthy. He was becoming wealthy in the only way that truly lasts. And maybe the greatest financial secret Japan has ever shared was never about money at all. It was about learning that the richest life begins the moment you stop measuring it by the things you own and start measuring it by the freedom, the purpose, and the peace those things can never buy. The end.